The Desert Illuminations Tarot has a vibrant, psychedelic, and mystical desert aesthetic. This deck blends neon-infused visuals with otherworldly Southwestern desert imagery, which is super surreal. This tarot deck is created by art teacher Lindsay D Williams and published by US Games in December 2024. US Games did gift me this deck, but there were no requirements to post, and all opinions are my own as always. So this deck creator lives in New Mexico, which comes as a surprise to no one based on the aesthetics of this deck, and she is a super cool woman. She is an artist, a designer, a tarot reader for over a decade, and she was even on America's Got Talent as a performance artist in 2019. I love someone who has lived so many lives, and I get the vibe that Lindsay is one of those people. One small detail that caught my eye about this deck immediately is the guidebook is actually called a codex. Now, this immediately drew me in because a codex is essentially an ancient book, which is like a stack of papers that's bound on the edges. And it's typically a sacred tome or like a mystical grimoire. I think it's also biblical. So when I saw that small detail, I knew we had a very mystical deck creator on our hands, and I was immediately in. It's a small thing like that deck creators do that really speaks volumes in their creation process and just has the ability to really resonate with you, even if it's just something so small like that. And before I forget to mention this, if you're interested in this aesthetic, these colors, but you're also interested in Bible references or religion, this deck creator is actually re-releasing their deck, the Illuminated Deck of Holy Souls, which is super trippy, but it's also religious. It looks super cool. And I think at the time of filming this, they are doing pre-orders for that deck to be released in May 2025, but I'm not sure if it's going to come out again, so if you're interested, definitely check it out. Guidebook for this deck is very small, but I'd say it's quite mighty. The guidebook briefly explains what we see in the cards, which is helpful for someone like myself who doesn't know much about Southwestern lore or mysticism. And there are no reversals in the guidebook, just so you know. I know people are always curious about that. And the major arcana in the guidebook actually lists associated planet, element, and chakra for each card, which I adore. I love that little extra touch. The cards in this deck follow the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but the suits are cactus for pentacles, daggers are swords, jugs are cups, and chilies are wands. Some deck creators try to switch the suits and it ends up being a mess and super hard to remember as a tarot reader, but I personally love these swaps. I think they make perfect sense. I find them intuitive to remember, and I think it really adds to the aesthetic of the deck. And I'm curious, now that we've flipped through quite a few cards in the deck, if you've noticed that the numbers are actually placed in random spots on every card instead of at the top or the bottom like most decks. The court cards, of course, being an exception, which is what we're looking at now, so my point is kind of mute, and same with the aces, but here we go. Now you can start to see that all of the numbers are actually in different places. They're not all just at the top or the bottom. And I really like that the deck creator took a risk to do this, to kind of change up the numbers a little bit, put them in different areas. I can't think of a deck off the top of my mind that does that, and I think it's really fun and unique. I feel like it really adds another layer of something you can read intuitively if you choose to, like asking yourself, was that number hard to find? Did that number feel hidden to you? Did it feel wrong where it was? I think personally for me, the weakest point of this deck is the court cards. It's not that I hate them. Some of them I actually really like. I think the artwork is still amazing in them. Obviously, they're beautiful. It's just some of the court cards to me feel a little bit flat as a reader. That's just me being very picky though. It's not poorly done by any means. It's maybe just a personal thing to me, but I just don't feel like they speak to me in the same way as a lot of the other cards in the deck do. I also love how the deck creator kind of fused this retro vibe with this otherworldly, almost futuristic vibe. It makes for a very fun deck. And I'm not someone who knows a lot about the Southwest, but I do love the Southwestern vibe. As someone who grew up in Canada, the Southwest to me always felt so foreign and different. And when I moved to California a few years ago, it was really fun to be immersed in the Southwest. I've also been to Nevada and Arizona quite a few times, and I really love the aesthetic, the vibe. It's super cool. You guys know I also am such a fan of color, so I absolutely adore how much color is used in this deck. And this deck feels very unique for me in my collection. I don't think I have a lot of other decks that I would say remind me of this deck or are similar to it. Closest probably being Cowgirls and Aliens Oracle, but that to me feels very different. Although it sounds similar, that one's definitely more steampunk and like sci-fi, whereas this one, even though it is sci-fi, it feels very different because this one is much more retro. I've used this deck in a couple of readings so far for myself and for the collective on TikTok, and they've been really great. I've enjoyed the readings. It felt super intuitive, timely, made sense. The cards shuffle really nicely. I honestly don't have any complaints about this deck. I think it's awesome. It's obviously a very specific aesthetic that might not resonate with everybody, but if this is your vibe and you're thinking about this deck, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong. Let me know what you think about this one. Is it on your wish list? Do you have this one? And would you use this one? Is the Desert Illuminations a purchase or a pass for you?